Mikhail Bulgakov, Fatal Eggs. Chapter 1. The Life Story of Professor Persakov. On the evening of April 16, 1928, Persakov entered his office at the Zoological Institute on Herzen Street. He was a professor of zoology at the Fourth State University and director of the Moscow Zoological Institute. He turned on the frosted light bulb on the ceiling and looked around. The start of the terrible disaster began exactly on this unlucky evening. The main cause of this disaster was Professor Vladimir Ipatiyevich Persakov himself. He was exactly 58 years old. He had an unusual head. It was bald and smooth, with bunches of yellowish hair sticking out on the sides. His face was clean-shaven, and his lower lip stuck out. This made Professor Persakov's face look always a bit grumpy. He wore small, old-fashioned glasses with silver frames on his red nose. His eyes were small and bright. He was tall and bent over. He spoke in a rough, thin, croaking voice. Among his other habits, he did this. When he spoke with confidence, he bent the index finger of his right hand into a hook and narrowed his eyes. He always spoke with confidence because he knew a lot in his field. So, the hook often appeared in front of the people talking to Professor Persakov. Outside his field, that is, zoology, embryology, anatomy, botany, and geography, Professor Persakov almost never talked. Professor Persakov did not read newspapers. He did not go to the theater. His wife left him in 1913 with a tenor from Zimin's opera. She left him a note that said this: "Your frogs make me feel an unbearable shiver of disgust. I will be unhappy all my life because of them." The professor never married again and had no children. He got angry easily, but he forgave quickly. He liked cloudberry tea. He lived on Prechestenka Street in a 5-room apartment. One room was used by an old, wrinkled woman, the housekeeper Maria Stepanovna. She took care of the professor like a nanny. In 1919, they took away 3 of the professor's 5 rooms. Then he told Maria Stepanovna, "If they don't stop this nonsense, Maria Stepanovna, I'll go abroad." There is no doubt that if the professor had done this plan, he could have easily gotten a job in the zoology department at any university in the world. He was a top scientist. In the field of amphibians or reptiles without scales, he had no equal, except for Professors William Weckel at Cambridge and Giacomo Bartolomeo Beccari at Rome. The professor gave lectures in 4 languages besides Russian. He spoke French and German like they were Russian. Persakov did not carry out his plans about going abroad. And 1920 was even worse than 1919. Events happened one after another. Bolshaya Nikitskaya Street was renamed Herzen Street. Then the clock in the wall of the house on the corner of Herzen and Mokovaya stopped at 11:15. Finally, in the terrariums of the Zoological Institute, the animals could not handle all the changes of that famous year. First, 8 beautiful tree frogs died. Then 15 common toads died. And finally, the most special one, the Suriname toad, died. Right after the toads, which ruined that first group of reptiles without scales, correctly called the class of amphibians without tails, the Institute's longtime caretaker, Old Man Vlas, died. He was not part of the class of reptiles without scales. He went to a better world. However, the cause of his death was the same as for the poor reptiles. Persakov figured it out right away. Starvation. The scientist was completely right. Vlas needed to be fed with flour, and the toads with mealworms. But since the flour disappeared, the mealworms disappeared too. Persikov tried to feed the remaining 20 tree frogs with cockroaches. But the cockroaches also disappeared. This showed their bad feelings toward war communism. So the last animals had to be thrown into the waste pits in the institute's yard. The effect of the deaths, especially the Suriname toad, on Persikov is hard to describe. For some reason, he blamed the deaths fully on the People's Commissar of Education at that time. Standing in a hat and rubber boots in the corridor of the Cold Institute, Persikov said to his assistant Ivanov, a very stylish man with a pointed blonde beard, "But killing him for this, Pyotr Stepanovich, wouldn't be enough. What are they doing? They'll destroy the institute." A unique male, a special example of Pipa americana, 13 centimeters long. Things got worse after that. After Vlas's death, the institute's windows froze completely. Colorful ice stuck to the inside of the glass. Rabbits, foxes, wolves, fish, and every single snake died. Persikov stayed silent for days. Then he got pneumonia, but he did not die. When he got better, he came to the institute twice a week. In the round hall, where it was always 5 degrees below zero, no matter the weather outside, he gave lectures on reptiles of the hot zone to 8 students. He wore rubber boots, a hat with ear flaps, and a scarf. He breathed out white steam. The rest of the time, Persikov lay on his sofa on Prechistenka, in a room full of books up to the ceiling. He stayed under a blanket, coughed, and looked into the hot stove. Maria Stepanovna heated it with gilded chairs. He remembered the Suriname toad. But everything in this world ends. 1920 and 1921 ended. In 1922, things started to change in the opposite way. First, Pankrat took the place of the dead Vlas. He was still young but a promising zoological caretaker. The institute began to be fixed up slowly. In the summer, Persikov, with Pankrat's help, caught 14 common toads on the Klyazma River. Life started to get active again in the terrariums. In 1923, Persikov was already giving lectures 8 times a week, 3 at the institute and 5 at the university. In 1924, 13 times a week, plus at the workers' schools. In the spring of 1925, he became famous for failing 76 students in exams, all on reptiles without scales. What? You don't know the difference between reptiles without scales and crawling creatures? Persikov asked. That's just silly, young man. Reptiles without scales don't have kidneys in the pelvis. They are missing. That's it. You should be ashamed. You're probably a Marxist. A Marxist, the failed student answered, getting quiet. So, please, come back in the fall, Persikov said politely and happily shouted to Pankrat. Let's go with the next one. Just as amphibians come back to life after a long dry period with the first heavy rain, Professor Persikov came back to life in 1926. That year, a company from America and Russia built 15 15-story buildings in the center of Moscow, starting from the corner of Gazetny Lane and Tverskaya Street. They also built 300 workers' houses on the edges of the city, each with 8 apartments. This ended the terrible and silly housing shortage that bothered people in Moscow from 1919 to 1925 once and for all. It was a real summer in Persikov's life. Sometimes he rubbed his hands with a quiet, happy laugh, remembering how he and Maria Stepanovna had crowded into 2 rooms. Now the professor got all 5 rooms back. He spread out, organized 2,500 books, stuffed animals, charts, and samples. He turned on a green lamp on the desk in his office. The institute changed a lot too. It was painted cream color. Water was brought to the reptile room through a special pipe. All the glass was replaced with mirror glass. They sent 5 new microscopes, glass tables for cutting, lights with 2,000 lamps that reflect light, reflectors, and cabinets for the museum. Persikov came back to life. The whole world suddenly learned about it in December 1926, when a small book came out, More on the Reproduction of Chitons or Plaque-Nosed Animals, 126 pages, News of the Four University. In the fall of 1927, a big 350-page book was published. It was translated into 6 languages, including Japanese, Embryology of Pupa, Garlic Toads and Frogs. Price, 3 rubles. State Publishing House. In the summer of 1928, something amazing and terrible happened. Chapter 2. Colored Swirl. So the professor turned on the light bulb and looked around. He turned on the reflector on the long experiment table. He put on his white coat and made some noise with tools on the table. Many of the 30,000 cars that drove in Moscow in 1928 rushed along Herzen Street. They made a soft sound on the smooth pavement. Every minute, trams on lines 16, 22, 48, or 53 rolled down Herzen Street toward Mokovaya Street with a loud noise. Reflections of colorful lights shone on the mirror windows of the office. Far and high up, a misty, pale half-moon could be seen next to the dark, heavy top of the Christ the Savior Cathedral. But neither the moon nor the sounds of spring in Moscow interested Professor Persikov at all. He sat on a 3-legged stool. His fingers, stained with tobacco, turned the knob of a great Zeiss microscope. It held a simple, unstained sample of fresh amoebas. Just as Persikov was changing the zoom from 5,000 to 10,000, the door opened a little. A pointed beard and a leather apron appeared. His assistant called out, "Vladimir Ipatiyevich, I set up the mesentery. Would you like to see it?" Persikov quickly got off the stool. He left the knob halfway and slowly twisted a cigarette in his hands. He walked into his assistant's office. There, on a glass table, a frog that was half dead from fear and pain was nailed to a cork board. Its clear, thin insides were pulled from its bloody belly into a microscope. "Very good," said Persikov. He put his eye to the microscope's lens. Clearly, something very interesting could be seen in the frog's mesentery. Live blood cells moved quickly through the blood vessels like rivers. Persikov forgot about his amoebas. For an hour and a half, he and Ivanov took turns looking at the microscope slide. The 2 scientists said lively but hard-to-understand words. Finally, Persikov looked up from the microscope and said, "The blood is getting thick. Nothing can be done." The frog moved its head slowly. In its dying eyes, you could clearly see the words, "You're mean people, that's what." Persikov stretched his stiff legs. He got up, went back to his office, yawned, and rubbed his always red eyelids with his fingers. He sat down on the stool and looked into the microscope. He put his fingers on the knob and was about to turn the screw. But he didn't. With his right eye, Persikov saw a cloudy white circle with unclear white amoebas. In the center of the circle sat a colored swirl, like a woman's hair curl. Persikov himself and hundreds of his students had seen this swirl many times. No one paid attention to it, and there was no need. The colored beam of light just got in the way of looking and showed that the sample was not in focus. So, It was usually removed without mercy by turning the screw once. This lit the field with even white light. The zoologist's long fingers were already tight on the screw's threads when they suddenly shook and slipped off. The reason was Persikov's right eye. It suddenly became alert, surprised, even scared. It was not some average person sitting at the microscope during the Republic's hard times. No, it was Professor Persikov. His whole life and thoughts were focused in his right eye. For 5 minutes, in complete silence, the smart person watched the simple one. He strained his eye over the sample that was out of focus. Everything around was quiet. Pankrat had already gone to sleep in his room in the entrance hall. Only once, far away, the glass in the cabinets made a musical, soft sound. Ivanov was leaving and locked his office. The front door made a noise after him. Then the professor's voice was heard. "It is not known who," he asked. "What is it?" "I don't understand anything." A late truck drove along Herzen Street and shook the old walls of the institute. A flat glass dish with tweezers made a noise on the table. The professor turned pale and raised his hand over the microscope, like a mother over a child in danger. Now Persikov would not turn the screw. Oh no, he was afraid that some outside force would push what he saw out of view. It was a bright white morning with a golden line across the institute's cream-colored entrance when the professor left his microscope. He walked on stiff legs to the window. With shaking fingers, he pressed the button. Black, thick curtains covered the morning. A wise, scientific night started in the office. With a yellow face and full of ideas, Persikov spread his legs and spoke. He looked at the wooden floor with wet eyes. "But how can this be? It's really terrible. It's really terrible, gentlemen," he repeated, talking to the toads in the terrarium. But the toads were sleeping and did not answer. He stopped, then went to the switch, opened the curtains, turned off all the lights, and looked into the microscope. His face became tight, and his thick yellow eyebrows came together. "Aha, aha," he said quietly. "It's gone. I understand." "Do you understand?" he said slowly, wildly, and with inspiration, looking at the turned-off light bulb above his head. "It's simple." He closed the hissing curtains again and turned on the light bulb again. He looked into the microscope and smiled happily, almost like a hunter. "I'll catch it," he said seriously and importantly, raising his finger. "I'll catch it. Maybe from the sun." The curtains opened again. The sun was there. It covered the walls of the institute and lay at an angle on the sidewalks of Herzen. The professor looked out the window, thinking about where the sun would be during the day. He moved back and forth, dancing a little, and finally lay on his stomach on the windowsill. He started an important and secret job. He covered the microscope with a glass dome. In the blue flame of the burner, he melted a piece of sealing wax and stuck the edges of the dome to the table. He pressed his thumb on the wax spots. He turned off the gas, left, and locked the office door with a Yale lock. The hallways of the institute had dim light. The professor reached Pankrat's room and knocked on it for a long time, without success. Finally, a growling sound like a watchdog, a spitting sound, and a moaning sound came from behind the door. Pankrat appeared in the light spot, wearing striped underwear with ties at the ankles. His eyes looked wildly at the scientist, and he still made soft, sleeping sounds. "Pankrat," the professor said, looking at him over his glasses. "Sorry I woke you. Listen, friend, don't go into my office tomorrow morning. I left some work there that can't be moved. Understand?" I get it," Pankrat answered, not understanding anything. He swayed and growled. "No, listen, wake up, Pankrat," the zoologist said, lightly poking Pankrat in the ribs. This made a scared look appear on his face and a bit of understanding in his eyes. "I locked the office," Persikov continued, "so no need to clean it until I come back. Understand?" "I understand," Pankrat croaked. "Well, that's good, go to bed." Pankrat turned, went through the door, and fell right onto his bed. The professor started dressing in the entrance hall. He put on a gray summer coat and a soft hat. Then, remembering the image under the microscope, he stared at his rubber boots as if seeing them for the first time. He put on the left one and tried to put the right one over the left, but it did not fit. "What a terrible coincidence that he called me away," said the scientist. "Otherwise I would never have noticed it. But what does this mean?" "It means who knows what." The professor smiled, narrowed his eyes at the boots, and took off the left one to put on the right one. "My God, you can't even think of all the results." The professor kicked the left boot with dislike because it annoyed him by not fitting over the right one. He walked to the exit wearing only one. He lost his handkerchief right away and left, closing the heavy door. On the porch, he looked in his pockets for matches for a long time, patting his sides. He found them and went down the street with an unlit cigarette in his mouth. The scientist did not meet anyone until the church. There, the professor looked up and stared at its golden top. The sun warmed it nicely on one side. "How come I haven't seen it before? What a coincidence." "Ugh, you fool." The professor bent over and thought, looking at his feet with different shoes. What to do? Go back to Pankrat? No, I can't wake him. It's a shame to leave it, the nasty thing. I'll have to carry it." He took off the boot and carried it with disgust. 3 people came out of Prechestenka in an old car. 2 were drunk, and on their knees was a woman painted brightly, wearing silk pants that were fashionable in 1928. "Oh, Daddy!" she cried in a low, rough voice. "Did you drink away the other boot? It looks like the old man got drunk in Alcazar," the drunk on the left yelled. The one on the right stuck out of the car and shouted, "Dad, is the night shelter on Folkanka open? We're going there." The professor looked at them strictly over his glasses, let the cigarette fall from his mouth, and forgot about them right away. A sunny gap was opening on Prechistinsky Boulevard, and Christ's top started to shine. The sun had risen. Chapter 3. Persikov's Discovery. When the professor looked closely into the microscope, he noticed something new. Among the many colors, one ray shone brighter than the rest. It was bright red and looked like a tiny point, about the size of a needle. For a few seconds, this red ray caught his trained eye. In that ray, the professor saw something far more important than the ray itself. It was like a fragile child, born by accident when the mirror and lens of the microscope moved. Because the assistant had called him, the amoeba stayed under the ray for an hour and a half. This is what happened. Outside the ray, the amoebas lay weak and lifeless. But inside the red ray, strange things began. The red stripe was full of life. The small gray amoebas stretched their tiny arms toward it and suddenly came alive. Some force gave them energy. They crawled together, fighting for space in the ray. Reproduction started at a crazy speed. The amoebas split apart, and each piece became a new organism in just 2 seconds. These new creatures grew up almost instantly and gave birth to more. Soon the red ray and then the whole disk was crowded. The young amoebas attacked each other, tore each other apart, and swallowed one another. Only the strongest survived. The strongest were frightening. They were twice as big as normal amoebas. They moved quickly with long arms like octopus tentacles. On the second evening, the professor, pale and tired, smoking only strong cigarettes, studied the new amoebas. On the third day, he turned back to the red ray itself. The gas hissed in the burner, cars moved outside, and the professor, poisoned by his 100th cigarette, leaned back in his chair with half-closed eyes. "Yes, now it's clear," he whispered. They were revived by a ray. A new ray, unknown to anyone. I must find out if it comes only from electricity or also from the sun. After another night, he understood. He caught 3 rays of light with 3 microscopes, but none from the sun. I suppose it's not in the sun's spectrum, so it can only be made by electric light, he said. Then he called Ivanov and showed him the amoebas. Assistant Professor Ivanov was shocked. How had nobody noticed this simple red arrow before? "Look at them, Vladimir Ipatiyevich," he cried. "They are growing right before my eyes. I've been watching them for 3 days." Persikov replied with excitement. The 2 scientists talked. Ivanov wanted to build a chamber with lenses and mirrors to catch the ray outside the microscope. He was sure it would be easy. Persikov agreed and promised to credit Ivanov in the published work. From then on, Ivanov worked with the ray too. Persikov stayed at the microscope while Ivanov built devices in the physics room with the help of a mechanic. Soon, parcels arrived from Germany with special mirrors and glass. Ivanov built a chamber and captured the red ray. It was thick, curved, for centimeters wide, sharp and strong. On June 1st, the chamber was placed in Persikov's office. He began experiments with frog eggs. The results were shocking. In 2 days, thousands of tadpoles hatched. In 1 more day, they grew into huge frogs, so fierce that half ate the other half. The survivors laid eggs early, and in 2 days, without the ray, a new countless generation appeared. The office was in chaos. Tadpoles crawled everywhere into terrariums and across the floor. Loud croaking filled the institute. Pankrat, who already feared Persikov, now felt only terror. A week later, Persikov himself felt close to madness. The smell of chemicals filled the building, and Pankrat was almost poisoned when he removed his mask. Finally, the frogs were killed with poison, and the rooms were cleaned. Persikov told Ivanov, "You know, Pyotr Stepanovich, the ray's effect on egg cells is amazing." Ivanov, usually cold and calm, interrupted him. "Vladimir Ipatiyevich, forget the small details. You have discovered something unheard of. You have found the ray of life." Persikov muttered, Well. Ivanov continued passionately, "You will be famous. Even Wells's heroes are nothing compared to you. Do you remember his Food of the Gods?" "It's a novel," Persikov answered. "Yes, he is famous." "I forgot it," Persikov said. "I read it, but I don't remember." "How can you forget? Just look," Ivanov said. lifting a huge dead frog with a swollen belly. Even in death, its face looked evil. It's monstrous. Chapter 4. Priest's wife Drozdova. No one knows why. Maybe Ivanov was guilty, or maybe news spreads by itself. But in huge, noisy Moscow, people suddenly began to talk about the Ray and Professor Persakov. The talk was short and unclear. The news of the strange discovery flew around the city like a wounded bird, sometimes disappearing, sometimes rising again. In mid-July, a small article appeared in Izvestia on page 20 under the title News of Science and Technology. It said that a professor at the Fourth University had invented a ray that made simple organisms grow stronger, and that this ray needed testing. The name was printed wrong, Persakov. Ivanov brought the newspaper and showed it to Persakov. Persakov, Persakov grumbled, working with the camera. How do these people know all this? But the wrong name did not protect him. The very next day, events began, and Persakov's life was disturbed. Pankrat knocked, came in, and gave Persakov a shiny satin business card. He's waiting outside, Pankrat said quietly. The card said, Alfred Arkadyevich Bronsky, employee of the Moscow magazines Red Light, Red Pepper, Red Magazine, Red Spotlight, and the newspaper Red Evening. Throw him out, Persakov said flatly and pushed the card under the table. Pankrat left, but 5 minutes later came back with a sad face and another copy of the same card. Are you joking? Persakov shouted angrily. They say he's from the GPU, Pankrat whispered, turning pale. Persakov grabbed the card, almost tearing it, and threw his tweezers on the table. On the card was written in curly letters, I kindly ask, respected professor, to receive me for 3 minutes on public press matters. I am an employee of the satirical magazine Red Raven, published by the GPU. Call him in, Persakov said, choking. A young man with a shiny, clean-shaven face walked in. His eyebrows were always raised. His eyes, like agate stones, never looked straight at anyone. He was dressed very fashionably. A tight jacket to the knees, very wide trousers, and strange shiny shoes with hoof-like toes. He carried a cane, a pointed hat, and a notebook. What do you want? Persakov asked in such a voice that Pankrat ran out at once. Didn't they tell you I'm busy? The young man bowed twice, left and right, then looked around the office and quickly wrote in his notebook. I'm busy, Persakov said, staring at him with disgust. But the man's eyes slipped away. I apologize, respected professor, the young man said in a thin voice. But the news of your world-famous discovery forces our magazine to ask for an explanation. What world? What explanations? Persakov cried. I don't owe you anything. I'm busy, very busy. What are you working on? The young man asked sweetly, writing again. What? Do you want to print something? Persakov asked. Yes, the man answered and began to scribble. First, I won't publish anything until I finish my work. Second, how do you know all this? Persakov said, suddenly confused. Is it true you invented a ray of new life? What new life? Persakov snapped. Nonsense. The ray is not studied yet. Maybe it makes protoplasm more active. How many times stronger? The man asked quickly. Persakov was lost. What a strange man. Suppose I say, 1,000 times. The man's eyes shone with joy. Do we get giant organisms? Not exactly. Yes, they are bigger than normal, and they have new properties, but the main thing is the speed of reproduction, Persikov said, regretting his words. The man wrote a whole page. You're writing. What are you writing? Persikov cried in despair. Is it true that 2 million tadpoles can come from eggs in 2 days? From how much spawn? Persikov shouted. Have you ever seen frog eggs? From half a pound? The man asked calmly. Persikov turned purple. Who measures like that? If you take half a pound of frog eggs, then maybe yes, maybe even more. The man's eyes sparkled like diamonds, and he wrote another page. Is it true this will cause a world revolution in farming? What kind of newspaper nonsense is this? Persikov howled. I don't give you permission to write lies. I can see you're writing something vile. I must ask for your photograph, Professor, the man said, closing his notebook. What? My photo? For your silly magazines? No. I'm busy. At least an old one. We'll return it. Pankrat! Persikov shouted in rage. I bow to you, the young man said and disappeared. Instead of Pankrat, strange machine noises came from outside the door. A heavy man entered the office. He wore a blouse and pants made of thick cloth. His left leg was mechanical and clicked loudly. He carried a briefcase. His round, clean-shaven face was yellowish and soft, but he smiled warmly. He bowed to the professor like a soldier, and his leg clicked again. Persikov was shocked. Professor, the man said in a rough but pleasant voice. Forgive me for disturbing you. Are you a reporter? Persikov asked angrily. Pankrat. No, Professor, the fat man replied. I am a sea captain and also work for the newspaper Bulletin of Industry under the Council of People's Commissars. Persikov screamed for Pankrat. A red light flashed in the corner, and the phone rang. Pankrat! Persikov shouted. The phone croaked in German. Excuse me, Herr Professor. I am a worker of the Berliner Tageblatt. Persikov shouted back in broken German. I am busy. Cannot receive you now. Pankrat! At that moment, bells rang at the Institute's entrance. Horrible murder on Branea Street, cried hoarse voices outside. Terrible chicken disease at the priest's widow Drozdova. A shocking discovery of Professor Persikov's ray of life. Persikov turned so fast he almost got hit by a car on Mokovaya Street. He grabbed a newspaper. 3 kopecks, citizen, shouted a boy, selling the red evening newspaper. The discovery of the X-ray. Persikov opened the paper and leaned against a lamppost. On the second page was a drawing of a bald man with wild eyes and a dropped jaw, an ugly picture made by Alfred Bronsky. The caption read, V.I. Persikov, discoverer of the mysterious red ray. Below was an article titled World Mystery, beginning, Have a seat, said the great scientist Persikov kindly. It was signed, Alfred Bronsky, Alonso. Suddenly, green light rose above the university roof. Fiery words appeared in the sky. Talking newspaper. A crowd filled Mokovaya Street. Sit down, shouted a thin, unpleasant voice from a rooftop megaphone. It sounded exactly like Bronsky's voice, only louder. The great scientist Persikov spoke kindly to us. I want to show the proletariat my discovery. Persikov felt someone pull his sleeve. He turned and saw the fat man with the mechanical leg. His eyes were wet with tears. "You refused to share your discovery with me, Professor," he said sadly. "My worms are gone." He looked at the roof where Bronsky's voice roared. Persikov suddenly felt sorry for him. "I never told him to sit down," Persikov muttered angrily. "He is just shameless. Forgive me, but when you are working and people break in, I don't mean you, of course. Could you at least describe your chamber, Professor?" The mechanical man asked softly. "You don't care anymore?" From the megaphone, Bronsky's voice shouted. "From 1/2 pound of frog eggs, so many tadpoles hatch in 3 days that no one can count them." The cars on Mokovaya honked dully. The crowd laughed and whispered, "What a scoundrel!" Persikov hissed to the mechanical man. "I'll report him." "Outrageous," the fat man agreed. A bright violet beam suddenly hit Persikov's eyes. Everything around him lit up, the lamppost, the pavement, the wall, the faces. "It's for you, Professor," whispered the fat man, holding his sleeve. "To hell with them all," Persikov cried, trying to escape. "Taxi! To Prechistenka!" An old car from 1924 rattled at the curb. Persikov jumped in, trying to get away from the fat man. "You're bothering me," he hissed, covering his eyes from the purple light. The crowd shouted, "Did you read it? Professor Persikov and his children were killed on Malaya Branaya." "I don't have any children, you fools," Persikov yelled. Suddenly, a black camera flashed, catching him with mouth open and eyes furious. The taxi screamed and crashed into the crowd. The fat man was already inside, sitting close to Persikov. Chapter 5. Chicken Story. In a small town once called Troitsk and now Steklovsk, in the Kostroma province, a woman stepped out of her house on Personalnaya Street and began to cry. She was the widow of Archpriest Drozdov. Her sobbing was so loud that another woman across the street looked out of her window and asked, "What is it, Stepanovna?" 17th, cried Drozdova, bursting into tears. "Oh my God," the neighbor said, shaking her head. "The Lord is angry. Is she really dead?" "Just look, Matryona," the widow sobbed. "Come and see what happened." The widow led Matryona to her chicken yard. This widow, Drozdova, had started a poultry farm after her husband died in 1926. At first, heavy taxes almost ruined her, but later she formed a cooperative with her servant Matryona and her deaf niece. The tax was removed, and by 1928 she had 250 hens. Her eggs were sold at the local market in Tambov and even in Moscow. But that morning, her 17th hen, the beloved crested hen, was sick. The hen walked around the yard, vomiting. "Crested hen, my darling, drink some water," Matryona begged, holding a cup, but the hen refused. She opened her beak, threw back her head, and vomited blood. "Oh my God," cried the guest. "I've never seen a chicken suffer like this." The hen fell on her side, poked her beak into the dust, closed her eyes, and then lay on her back with her legs up. She was dead. Matryona and the widow cried loudly. The guest whispered, "Stepanovna, someone cursed your chickens. This is not a normal disease." "Enemies of my life," the widow shouted. "Why do they want to destroy me?" A rooster crowed. Then a ragged rooster ran out of the coop, stamping and spreading his wings. He circled the yard like a horse, then vomited blood and collapsed. The hens inside the coop clucked and flapped in panic. "Isn't it a curse?" the guest said. "Call Father Sergius." At 6 in the evening, Father Sergius came and held a prayer service. People watched from behind the fence. The widow gave him a torn ruble, wet with her tears. He sighed and said the Lord was angry. That night, more chickens died. 3 hens and a rooster in the neighbor's coop, and all of Drozdova's hens after the service. By morning, the whole town was shocked. By midday, only 3 chickens were left alive on Personalnaya Street, but they too died by 1 o'clock. By evening, the town was buzzing with fear. People whispered the word pestilence. The local newspaper Krasny Boets printed an article titled, "Is it really a chicken plague?" And the story spread to Moscow. Meanwhile, Persikov's life became restless and chaotic. It was impossible to work. The day after his fight with Bronsky, he turned off the telephone in his office. That evening, riding a tram, he saw his own image projected on a building with the sign Rabakaya Gazeta. On the screen, he was shown climbing into a taxi, with the mechanical man following him. A fiery caption read, "Professor Persikov gives an explanation to our famous reporter, Captain Stepanov." Indeed, a car sped past the Cathedral of Christ the Savior, showing Persikov inside, looking like a hunted wolf. "These are devils, not people," he muttered. That evening, back at his apartment, his housekeeper Maria Stepanovna gave him 17 notes with phone numbers of people who had called. She said she was exhausted. Persikov wanted to tear them up, but stopped when he saw one note marked, "People's Commissar of Health." "What's wrong?" he asked, confused. At 10:30 that night, the phone rang again. A richly dressed man came to see him, carrying a card that read, "Plenipotentiary Chief of the Trade Departments of Foreign Missions to the Republic of Soviets." "Damn him," Persikov growled. He told Maria Stepanovna to bring the man in. "How can I help you?" Persikov asked coldly. He moved his glasses up and down, studying the visitor. The man was covered in shiny varnish and jewels, with a monocle in his eye. What an ugly face, Persikov thought. The guest asked to light a cigar, then sat down. He apologized for coming late. "But it's impossible to catch the professor during the day." "Pardon." He laughed like a hyena. "Yes, I'm busy," Persikov said sharply. The guest shivered but continued, "Time is money. May I smoke a cigar?" Purr, Persikov muttered, allowing it. The professor discovered the ray of life, didn't he? "What ray of life? That's just newspaper nonsense," Persikov snapped. The guest laughed softly. "Oh no, the whole world already knows. In Warsaw, in Riga, telegrams speak of you. Everyone repeats your name. But here in Soviet Russia, scientists are not valued. A foreign state wants to help you. They will give money for your work. You only need to share your results. Show us the chamber plans." He pulled out a white stack of papers. "The professor can get 5,000 rubles right now. No receipt needed. Get out!" Persikov shouted so loudly that the piano in the next room rang. The guest vanished. Persikov, trembling with rage, wondered if it had been real or a dream. "His galoshes?" Persikov cried. "They forgot them," said Maria Stepanovna. "Throw them out." "Where? They will come back for them." Give them to the house office. Sign a receipt. These spy galoshes must not stay here. Maria crossed herself, took the fine galoshes, and hid them in a closet. Did you hand them over? Persikov asked. Yes. Give me the receipt. The chairman is illiterate, she explained. Then let someone literate sign, Persikov shouted. She returned later with a note. Received from Professor Persikov 1 pair of galoshes. Kolsov. What is this? A token, sir. Persikov stamped on the token, hid the receipt, and called Pankrat at the institute. Is everything all right? Pankrat growled yes, but Persikov still worried. He called Lubyanka, reporting suspicious people in galoshes. The line cut off. Would you like tea? Maria asked timidly. I won't drink tea. Damn them all, Persikov muttered. 10 minutes later, new guests arrived. One was plump, polite, in a military tunic, with pince-nez shining like crystal. He looked like an angel in boots. The second was short and gloomy in civilian clothes. The third stayed in the hallway, wearing smoky pince-nez. The two in the office questioned Persikov about the 5,000 rubles and the guest's face. He had a nasty face, Persikov said. Was his eye glassy? Asked the short man. No, his eyes moved quickly. Rubinstein? The angel asked. No, the short man said. Someone more important. The galoshes caused great interest. The angel called the house office. Soon Kolsov arrived, pale, holding the galoshes. Vasenka, the angel called. The man from the hallway came in slowly. His smoky glasses hid his eyes. Well? He asked. Galoshes. He looked at them. For a moment Persikov thought he saw sharp, piercing eyes behind the lenses. Then they faded. Well, Vasenka? Polenskov's galoshes, he said. The galoshes disappeared into the newspaper. The angel shook Persikov's hand and promised, You can rest easy. No one will disturb you again. Your institute and home are secure. Couldn't you just shoot the reporters? Persikov asked. The guests laughed. The angel explained it was impossible. And who was that scoundrel? Persikov asked. Just a small swindler, the angel said vaguely. Forget him, but please keep tonight's events secret. They left. Persikov returned to his diagrams, but the phone rang again. A woman offered him a 7-room apartment if he married a widow. Go to Professor Rasolimo for treatment, Persikov shouted. Then another call came from a well-known Kremlin figure, asking kindly about his work and promising to visit the lab. Persikov wiped his brow. Suddenly, from the upstairs apartment, loud trumpets and Wagner's Valkyries blasted from the radio. Persikov shouted to Maria, I'm leaving Moscow. I'll sue the director. I'll smash the radio. He broke his magnifying glass and lay down on the sofa, falling asleep to the music from the Bolshoi Theater. The next day brought more surprises. When Persikov arrived at the institute by tram, he saw a stranger in a green bowler hat standing on the steps. The man looked at him carefully but said nothing, so Persikov ignored him. Inside the hall, another man in a bowler hat greeted him politely. Hello, citizen professor. What do you want? Persikov asked nervously, while Pankrat helped him with his coat. But the man spoke softly, saying the professor should not worry. He was there to protect Persikoff from annoying visitors, even guarding the doors and windows. He showed a badge inside his jacket. You are well prepared, Persikoff muttered. But what will you eat here? The man smiled and said he would be replaced later. For 3 days everything went smoothly. Persikoff received 2 visits from the Kremlin, and once his students came. They were so frightened of him that they left sweating and pale. On the 4th day, Persikoff was resting in his office, tired and with red eyes, smoking in a chair. Suddenly a thin voice shouted from the street, "Vladimir Ipatjevich!" Persikoff looked out the window and saw Alfred Bronsky, with his pointed hat and notebook. Bronsky bowed respectfully. "Just a couple of minutes, Professor," he called. "I have one zoological question. May I ask?" "Go ahead," Persikoff said ironically, thinking, "This scoundrel looks American. What do you think about chickens, Professor?" Bronsky shouted. Persikoff was surprised. He called Pankrat to let Bronsky in. When Bronsky entered, Persikoff barked, "Sit down!" Bronsky smiled and sat on a stool. "Tell me," Persikoff asked, "what do you write in your newspapers?" "Exactly," Bronsky replied respectfully. "And how can you write if you don't even speak Russian? You said, 'for chickens' instead of 'about chickens.'" Bronsky laughed. "Valentin Petrovich corrects me." "Who is that?" "Head of the literary department." "Well, fine. What exactly do you want to know about chickens?" "Anything you say, Professor." Bronsky took out his pencil. Sparks lit up in Persikoff's eyes. "You shouldn't ask me. I'm not an expert on birds. Ask Portugalov at the First University. But chickens belong to the pheasant family. They have a fleshy comb, sometimes 2 lobes under the jaw, sometimes 1 in the middle. Their wings are short, tails medium, feathers curved like a sickle. I know 6 species of wild chickens. For example, the Banki chicken in India and Burma, the fork-tailed chicken in Lombok and Flores, the Java rooster, Sonorathus cock in India, and the Stanley cock in Ceylon. Bronsky listened with wide eyes, writing quickly. "Anything else?" Persikoff asked. "I'd like to know about chicken diseases," Bronsky whispered. "I'm not an expert, but there are many. Tapeworms, mites, lice, fleas, cholera, tuberculosis, scab, poisoning, tumors, jaundice, rheumatism, and even a fungus disease that makes mold-like spots on the comb." Bronsky wiped sweat from his forehead. "And what, Professor, is the cause of the current catastrophe?" "What catastrophe?" Persikoff asked. "You haven't read it?" Bronsky pulled out a crumpled newspaper. "I don't read newspapers," Persikoff frowned. "Why not, Professor?" "Because they write nonsense." "But look at this," Bronsky whispered, opening the paper. "What's wrong?" Persikoff asked, standing up. Sparks danced in Bronsky's eyes. He pointed to the headline, "Chicken Plague in the Republic." "How?" Persikoff muttered, pushing his glasses up on his forehead. Chapter 6. Moscow in June 1928. The city glowed with lights that flickered and faded. White bus lights and green tram lights swirled in Theater Square. Above the old Muir and Merrilees building on its 10th floor, a bright electric sign showed a woman jumping, spelling out the words workers' credit. In front of the Bolshoi Theater, where a colorful fountain played at night, a crowd gathered. Above the theater, a giant megaphone shouted, "Anti-chicken vaccinations at the Lefortovo Veterinary Institute have worked well. Chicken deaths have been cut in half." The megaphone changed tone, growled, and then spoke in a deep voice. "An emergency commission has been formed to fight the chicken plague. It includes the Commissariat of Health, Commissariat of Agriculture, Comrade Takaporosiuk, Professors Persakov and Portugalov, and Comrade Rabinovich. The streets, Tichelny Proizd, Negliny, and Lubyanka, were full of white and purple lights, horns, and dust. Crowds stood near big notice boards lit by red lamps. The population is forbidden to eat chicken meat or eggs. Sellers will be punished. All citizens must bring eggs to the police station." On the roof of the Rabakaya Gazeta newspaper, a huge pile of chickens appeared on the screen. Firefighters sprayed kerosene on them, and red waves of smoke rose. A fiery caption read, "The burning of chicken carcasses at Kodinka." Shops with signs like "Egg Trade, Quality Guaranteed" had boarded up windows. Ambulances from the Moscow Health Department rushed past. "Someone ate rotten eggs again," the crowd whispered. In the famous restaurant Ampere, green and orange lanterns shone. On the tables were signs, "No omelette," "Fresh oysters available." In the Hermitage, Chinese lanterns glowed sadly. On stage, the singers Shrams and Karmanchikov performed a comic song, "Oh, Mom, what will I do? No eggs." They danced in tap shoes. The Meyerhold Theater showed a bright sign for the play Kuri Dok by Irendorg, directed by Meyerhold's student Kuchterman. Nearby, in the aquarium, another show called Kuritsin Dedi by Lenivtsev was performed. Down Tverskaya Street, circus donkeys carried banners. Chanticleer is revived at the Korsh Theater. Newsboys shouted, "A terrible discovery in the dungeon. Poland prepares for war. Professor Persakov's terrible experiments." In Nikitin's old circus, clowns Boem and Bim performed. Boem said, "I know why you are sad." "Why?" squeaked Bim. "You buried eggs in the ground, and the police found them." The circus laughed loudly, trapezes shook, and a white horse carried a beautiful woman in red tights onto the stage. Persakov walked alone along Mokovaya Street. He ignored the crowds and the calls of prostitutes. He was deep in thought, proud of his sudden fame. Near the riding arena, he bumped into a strange man with a revolver on his belt. "Oh, sorry," Persakov squeaked. "Excuse me," the man replied coldly. They moved apart, and Persakov, heading home to Prechistenka, quickly forgot the meeting. Chapter 7. Rock. No one knew if the veterinary vaccinations in Lefortovo really worked, or if the Samara barriers helped, or if the strict rules in Kaluga and Voronezh were effective, or if the Moscow Emergency Commission did its job. But it was clear that 2 weeks after Persakov's last meeting with Alfred, the whole Soviet Union was free of chickens. In small towns, only a few feathers lay in the yards, making people sad. In hospitals, the last careless people were dying from bloody diarrhea and vomiting. Luckily, human deaths were no more than 1,000. There was no big unrest. A prophet in Volokholamsk said the commissars had killed the chickens, but few believed him. At the market, some policemen were beaten while taking chickens, and the post office windows were smashed. The local authorities quickly stopped the prophet and replaced the windows. The plague ended in Arkhangelsk because the White Sea blocked it. It stopped in Vladivostok because the ocean lay beyond. In the south, it faded in the dry lands of Ordobat, Judba, and Karabulak. In the west, it stopped at the Polish and Romanian borders. Maybe the climate was different, or maybe the neighbors' protective measures worked. Foreign newspapers wrote about the disaster, but Soviet authorities stayed quiet and worked hard. The commission was renamed the Emergency Commission for the Revival of Poultry Farming. A new group of 16 members was added. A society called Dobroker was founded, with Persakov and Portugalov as honorary members. Newspapers showed their portraits with headlines like "Mass Purchase of Eggs Abroad" and "Mr. Yuz Wants to Disrupt the Egg Campaign." Journalist Kolechkin wrote, "Don't covet our eggs, Mr. Yuz. You have your own." Persakov was exhausted. For 3 weeks he worked non-stop. He attended endless meetings, spoke with Alfred Bronsky and the Mechanical Fat Man, and worked with Portugalov, Ivanov, and Borngart to study chickens under the microscope. He even wrote a quick brochure on liver changes in chickens during plague. But Persakov's heart was not in chicken research. His mind was on something greater, the red ray. He lost sleep and food, sometimes staying at the institute all night, sleeping on the sofa, working with his camera and microscope. By late July, things calmed down. The commission's work became routine, and Persakov returned to his experiments. Fish and frog eggs grew quickly in the ray chamber. Special glass slides arrived from Königsberg. Under Ivanov's guidance, mechanics built 2 new large chambers. The ray inside was wide, like a cigarette box at the base and a meter across at the mouth. Persakov was delighted and prepared for new experiments. He spoke with the Commissar of Education, who promised support. He called Comrade Takaporosiuk, head of animal husbandry, who gave him warm attention and promised to telegraph Berlin and New York about foreign orders. Even the Kremlin asked about his progress and offered him a car. "No, thank you. I prefer the tram," Persakov said. "But why?" asked the voice kindly. "He walks faster," Persakov replied. Another week passed. Persakov forgot about chickens and focused fully on the ray. His sleepless nights made his mind strangely clear. His eyes were always ringed red. He spent nearly every night at the institute. One day he gave a lecture about the ray and its effect on egg cells at the Seacub Hall on Prechestenka. It was a huge success. The audience clapped so hard that things fell from the ceiling. Bright lights shone on the men in tuxedos and the women in white dresses. On stage, a frog the size of a cat sat on a plate, breathing heavily. People threw notes, even love letters, which Persakov tore up. He bowed irritably, his tie crooked. He noticed, for a moment, a yellow pistol holster behind a column, but forgot it. As he left, walking down the red-carpeted stairs, he suddenly felt sick. The chandelier went dark, his vision blurred, and he thought he smelled smoke. He imagined hot blood running down his neck. Trembling, he grabbed the railing. "Are you unwell, Vladimir Ipatievich?" Voices cried. "No, no," Persakov said, recovering. "I'm just tired. Please, give me water." It was a sunny August day. The professor disliked the brightness, so he closed the blinds. A reflector sent a sharp beam of light onto a glass table covered with instruments. Persakov leaned back in his chair, smoking, exhausted but satisfied. Through the smoke, he looked at the chamber door, slightly open, where the red ray glowed quietly, warming the heavy air of the office. There was a knock at the door. "Well?" asked Persakov. The door opened softly, and Pankrat came in. Pale with fear, he said, "Professor, Rock has arrived." Persikov smiled faintly, narrowed his eyes, and replied, "That's interesting, but I'm busy." "They say he has papers from the Kremlin," Pankrat added. "Rock and paper? Strange mix. Bring him in," Persikov said. A minute later, a man entered. Persikov looked at him over his glasses. The man seemed very old-fashioned. In 1928, his clothes looked strange. A double-breasted leather jacket, green trousers, puttees, ankle boots, and a big Mauser pistol in a yellow holster. His face was unpleasant, his eyes small and confident, his legs short, his feet flat. Persikov frowned. "Do you have the paper? Where is it?" Persikov asked. The man was surprised by what he saw. The tall bookcase full of books, the chambers glowing with a red beam, and Persikov himself in the half-darkness, looking serious in his chair. Respect flickered in his eyes. He did not give the paper right away, but said, "I am Alexander Semenovich Rock." "So what?" Persikov asked. "I have been appointed head of the demonstration farm Red Ray," Rock explained. "So what?" "I came with secret instructions for you." Rock pulled out an official order on thick paper and gave it to Persikov. Then, without asking, he sat down. "Don't push the table," Persikov said angrily. Persikov read the paper, then rushed to the phone. He spoke quickly, upset. "How is this possible? Without my consent, without my advice. Who knows what he will do?" Rock looked offended, but Persikov continued, "I object completely. I will not allow experiments with eggs until I test them myself." The voice on the phone answered condescendingly, like speaking to a child. Persikov slammed the phone down, red-faced. "I wash my hands of this," he said. He read the paper again, then shouted, "Pankrat!" When Pankrat appeared, Persikov barked, "Get out!" Pankrat left without surprise. Persikov turned to Rock. "Fine, I obey. It's not my business. I'm not interested." Rock was amazed. "I apologize, comrade." "Why do you all say comrade, comrade?" Persikov muttered. Then Persikov showed him the chamber. "Here is the arc sphere. Move the eyepiece, use lens number 1 and mirror number 2. On the floor of the chamber you can place anything and test it. Very simple." Persikov spoke with irony, but Rock did not notice. He stared at the beam with shining eyes. "I warn you," Persikov said, "don't put your hands in the beam. It makes cells grow fast. I don't know yet if they are malignant." Rock quickly hid his hands. They were burned with iodine and one was bandaged. "And you, Professor?" he asked. "You can buy rubber gloves at Schwabe on Kuznetsky," Persikov replied irritably. Persikov looked at him closely. "Where did you come from? Why you?" Rock grew offended. "Sorry. You must know what's happening. Why are you clinging to this beam?" "Because it is very important," Rock said firmly. "The greatest importance?" "Then, Pankrat," Persikov called, then stopped him. "Wait, I'll think." Finally, Persikov said, "I don't understand why there is such haste and secrecy." Rock answered, "Professor, you already know. Every single chicken has died." "So what?" Persikov shouted. Why do you want to bring chickens back instantly? And why with a ray that is not studied yet? Comrade Professor, Rock replied, you confuse me. We must restore chicken farming here at home. Abroad they write bad things about us. Let them write, Persikov said angrily. Well, you know, Rock answered mysteriously. I wonder who thought of raising chickens with eggs and the ray? Persikov asked. Me, Rock said. And why? How did you learn about the ray's power? I was at your lecture, Rock explained. I haven't tried it with eggs yet. I'm only preparing, Persikov cried. By God, it will work, Rock said sincerely. Your ray is so strong you could raise elephants, not just chickens. You're not a zoologist, are you? Persikov asked. Too bad. You'd make a brave experimenter. But you risk failure. You waste my time. We'll return the chambers, Rock said. When? I'll bring the first batch soon. You speak so confidently, Persikov muttered. Very well, Pankrat. I have people with me, Rock added. And security. By evening, Persikov's office was empty. Rock's men had taken the 3 large chambers, leaving only the small one, the first Persikov had used. Twilight fell over the institute. Persikov paced the room in silence. The toads sang a sad, warning chorus. Pankrat caught a snake in the corridor. It looked desperate to escape. The office bell rang. Pankrat entered and saw Persikov standing alone, staring at the empty tables. Here, Pankrat, Persikov said, pointing at the bare table. Pankrat was horrified. He thought he saw tears in the professor's eyes. Yes, sir, Pankrat whispered, thinking. It would be better if he yelled at me. There, Persikov repeated, his lips trembling like a child whose toy was taken away. You know, Pankrat, Persikov continued, turning to the window. My wife left me 15 years ago. She joined the operetta. Now she has died. They sent me a letter. The toads cried sadly. Night fell. White lights glowed outside the windows. Pankrat stood frozen, afraid. Go, Pankrat, Persikov said heavily. Go to bed, my dear Pankrat. Pankrat tiptoed out, ran to his small room, found a bottle of Russian bitters, and drank it in one gulp. He ate bread and salt, and his eyes grew brighter. Near midnight, Pankrat sat barefoot on a bench in the dim vestibule, talking to the duty officer. It would have been better if he killed her, Pankrat muttered. Did he really cry? Asked the man in the bowler hat. Yes, sir, Pankrat said. Great scientist, the bowler hat agreed. But everyone knows a frog cannot replace a wife. No way, Pankrat agreed. Then he added, I'm thinking of bringing my granny here. Why should she stay in the village? She can't stand those people. It's a terrible shame, the bowler hat said. The professor's office was silent. No light shone under the door. Chapter 8. History on the State Farm. August is the best time of year, even in Smolensk province. The summer of 1928 was excellent. Good spring rains, hot sunshine, and a rich harvest. Apples ripened on the old Sheremetev estate. Forests were green, and fields were golden. Even Alexander Semyonovich looked better here than in the city. He no longer wore his ugly jacket. His face was tanned, his cotton shirt open on his hairy chest, and he wore canvas trousers. His eyes seemed calmer. He ran quickly from the porch of the Krasny Luch State Farm to the truck that had brought 3 black chambers under guard. All day he and his helpers worked to install the chambers in the old greenhouse. By evening, everything was ready. A white globe shone under the glass ceiling. The chambers stood on bricks, and the mechanic lit a mysterious red beam inside the black boxes on the asbestos floor. Alexander climbed ladders himself, checking wires. The next day, the truck returned with 3 boxes of smooth plywood, marked with labels. Vorsicht, Eier, caution, eggs. Why so few? Alexander wondered, but he quickly began unpacking. In the greenhouse, he was helped by his plump wife Menya, the one-eyed gardener, the guard, and the cleaner Dunya. Life here was simpler than in Moscow. Alexander gave orders, smiling at the boxes in the sunset light. The guard broke the fastenings with pliers. Dust fell. Inside, the eggs were carefully packed. Paraffin paper, blotting paper, shavings, sawdust, and finally the white shells appeared. "This is foreign packaging," Alexander said proudly. "Not like ours." "Manya, be careful." "You're crazy," his wife replied. "I've seen eggs before. But oh, they're so big. They're foreign Brahmaputras," Alexander said. "Of course," the guard agreed. "I don't understand why they're dirty," Alexander said. "Menya, watch them. I'll answer the phone." He went to the office. That evening, the phone rang at the Zoological Institute. Persikov answered. "Well?" he asked. "The province will speak," a woman's voice said. Then a man asked nervously, "Professor, should I wash the eggs?" "What? Where are you calling from?" Persikov asked angrily. "From Nikolskoye, Smolensk province." "Who is this?" "Rock," the voice said. "Oh, it's you. What are you asking?" "They sent me chicken eggs from abroad. They are dirty. They may have some droppings, but don't wash them." "Are you loading them into the chambers?" "Yes, charging," Rock replied. "Bye," Persikov said coldly. He turned to Ivanov. "What do you think of this man, Pyotr Stepanovich? I can imagine what he'll cook up with those eggs," Ivanov said. Persikov grew angry. "Just imagine. Maybe the ray will affect the egg cells like it does amoebas. Maybe chickens will hatch. But what kind? They could be worthless, die in 2 days, or be uneatable. Maybe their bones will be too weak." "Absolutely right," Ivanov agreed. "Can you guarantee they'll reproduce? Maybe he'll breed giant sterile chickens, the size of dogs, and expect them to have offspring forever." "I can't guarantee it," Ivanov said. "And such arrogance," Persikov cried. "I was ordered to instruct this fool, but I myself don't know the results." He pointed to Rock's paper on the table. "Couldn't you refuse?" Ivanov asked. Persikov showed him the paper. Ivanov read it and smiled ironically. He said. "And I've been waiting 2 months for my own order, but nothing came. Yet Rock immediately got eggs and help." "He won't succeed," Ivanov said. "They'll just return the chambers." "Yes, I hope so. They're delaying my experiments." "That's bad. I have everything ready." "Did you get the spacesuits?" Persikov asked. "Yes, this morning," Ivanov replied. Persikov grew calmer and spoke with more energy. "Aha, we'll do it this way. We'll close the operating room doors tightly and open the window. Of course, Ivanov agreed. 3 helmets. 3, yes. So you, me, and 1 student. Give him the 3rd helmet. Greenmouth could do it, Ivanov suggested. That student with the salamanders? Chum. He's okay, though in spring he couldn't explain the swim bladder of salamanders, Persakov said sharply. He's fine. A good student, Ivanov defended. I'll go without sleep tonight, Persakov continued. But check the gas, Pyotr Stepanovich. Who knows what they send us? No, Ivanov waved. I tested it yesterday. It's excellent gas. On what? On toads. Spray them once, they die instantly. We'll use it again. Also, write to the GPU office for an electric revolver. I don't know how to use it. I'll take it, Ivanov said. We tried it on the Klyazma River. It shoots silently, kills at 100 paces. We shot crows. Maybe we don't even need gas. Clever idea, Persakov muttered, picking up the phone. Give me, Lubyanka, he croaked. The days were very hot. Heat shimmered over the fields. Nights were green and beautiful. The moon lit the Sheremetev estate like sugar. Shadows trembled in the park. Ponds glowed half in light, half in darkness. In the grove, Dunya the cleaner met the red-mustached truck driver. They lay together under an elm tree. In the kitchen, gardeners ate dinner. Madame Rock sat on the veranda in a white bonnet, dreaming under the moon. At 10 p.m., the village sounds faded. The night filled with flute music. A melody from the Queen of Spades rose into the moonlit sky. Dunya listened, cheek pressed to the driver's face. He plays well, the driver said, holding her. It was Alexander Semyonovich Rock himself playing the flute. Before 1917, he had been a musician in Maestro Petakov's ensemble. But the revolution changed his life. He left music, took up a Mauser pistol, and lived through war in Crimea, Moscow, Turkestan, and Vladivostok. Later, he became a newspaper editor and irrigation expert in Turkestan. In 1928, he came to Moscow, met Persakov's invention, and proposed using the ray to restore chickens. The livestock committee agreed, and Rock brought Persakov official papers. The concert ended suddenly. Dogs in Kontsovka began barking wildly, then howling together. Frogs in the ponds answered with a loud chorus. The night turned eerie. Rock stopped playing and went outside. Menya, do you hear? Those dogs. What made them mad? How should I know? She replied. Let's go look at the eggs, Rock said. By God, you're obsessed with chickens. Rest a little. No, let's go. In the greenhouse, the globe glowed. Dunya arrived, her face shining. Rock opened the inspection windows. Inside, bright red eggs lay in rows on the asbestos floor. The globe hissed softly. I'll hatch chicks, Rock said excitedly. You'll see. You know, Dunya smiled. The people in Kontsovka call you Antichrist. They say your eggs are devil's eggs. They want to kill you. Rock turned pale. What people? Tomorrow I'll call workers and give a speech. We must work, not gossip. It's dark, the guard muttered from his place near the door. The next day brought strange events. At sunrise, the groves were silent. No birds sang. People noticed it everywhere. Rumors spread. Rock's uncle, nicknamed Goat's Crop, said all the birds had flown north at dawn. Rock was upset and tried to call Grichenka. They promised to send speakers in 2 days. By evening, the famous frogs of Sheremetevka Pond also fell silent. Not a single croak. People whispered behind Rock's back. "It's strange," Rock said at dinner. "Why did the birds fly away?" "Maybe because of your ray," Menya answered. "Well, Menya, you're a fool," Alexander Semenovich said, throwing down his spoon. "What does the ray have to do with it?" "I don't know. Leave me alone," Menya replied. That evening brought another surprise. The dogs in Kontsovka howled again, louder than before. Their mournful cries spread across the moonlit fields. In the greenhouse, Alexander Semenovich found a happier surprise. From the red eggs came a steady knocking sound. Tap, tap, tap. First in one egg, then another, then a third. The sound filled him with triumph. He forgot the strange silence of the groves and ponds. Everyone gathered in the greenhouse. Menya, Dunya, the watchman, and the guard. "Well, what do you say?" Alexander asked proudly. "They're pecking with their beaks," he explained. "You said I wouldn't hatch chicks? Just wait. I'll hatch some that will amaze you. Watch carefully. As soon as they start hatching, tell me at once." "Okay." The others answered together. The eggs bubbled and clicked. The sight of new life inside the glowing shells was so fascinating that the group sat for hours, watching the crimson eggs in the flickering light. They went to bed late, while outside the dogs kept howling in the night. No one knew why. The next morning, Alexander faced a shock. The guard swore he had not slept, but still had not seen anything. "It's not my fault, Comrade Rock," the guard said nervously. "Thank you? I'm grateful," Alexander scolded. "Why were you put there?" "To watch." "Where did they go?" "They hatched, didn't they? And then they ran away." "You left the door open." "I didn't leave," the guard protested angrily. "My job is to guard the cameras, not chase your chickens. Who knows what kind of creatures you hatch? Maybe you couldn't catch them even on a bicycle." Alexander fell silent, astonished. In the first chamber, 2 eggs had cracked. One shell lay broken on the asbestos floor. "They didn't fly out through the roof," he muttered, staring at the holes in the glass frame. "You're not going to tell me chickens can fly?" Dunya said, surprised. She searched the corners of the greenhouse, calling chick, 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 but found nothing. The whole staff spent 2 hours searching the farmyard. No chickens were found. The day passed in agitation. Another guard was added, ordered to check the chamber windows every 15 minutes. He sat by the door with his rifle. Alexander, exhausted, ate lunch late, napped on an old ottoman, then returned to the greenhouse. The elderly guard lay on the matting, peering into the window of the first chamber. Then came new sounds. In the third chamber, the eggs began to smack and click, as if something inside was sobbing. "They're ripening," Alexander said with excitement. "Now I see it." "Did you see them?" he asked the watchman. "Yes, it's wonderful," Rock said vaguely. He sat by the cameras for a while, then stood, stretched, and said he was going to the pond for a swim. He told the others to call him if anything happened. In the palace bedroom, 2 narrow beds stood with messy sheets, and on the floor were piles of apples and millet for the future chicks. He took a towel and his flute, planning to play by the water. Rock walked quickly through the willow alley toward the pond, waving his towel and holding the flute. The hot sky pressed down, and he longed for water. As he passed a thicket of burdocks, he spat into it. Suddenly, he heard rustling inside, like someone dragging a log. He felt uneasy. The pond had been silent for 2 days. The rustling stopped, and dragonflies flew past. Then the sound came again, joined by a hiss like steam escaping. Rock stared into the weeds. Alexander Semenovich called his wife Menya. Her white blouse flashed between raspberry bushes. "Wait, I'm coming to swim too." But Rock didn't answer. From the burdocks, a huge gray-green log began to rise. Yellow spots dotted it. It stretched taller than a willow tree, thick and scaly like a tattooed pole. Rock froze. His heart stopped for a moment. At the top appeared a head, flat, pointed, with a yellow spot on olive skin. Narrow, lidless eyes glared with cold malice. The head moved, swallowing burdock leaves, but the eyes stayed fixed on Rock. Sweating, terrified, he whispered, "What kind of joke is this?" He thought of Indian fakirs and their tricks with snakes. The head rose higher, the body shifted. Rock lifted his flute and, gasping, tried to play the waltz from Eugene Onegin. "Are you crazy? Playing in this heat?" Menya's cheerful voice called. Suddenly, a piercing screech filled the air. The snake burst from the burdocks, 15 yards long, as thick as a man. Dust flew. The waltz stopped. The snake rushed toward the white blouse on the road. Rock saw Menya turn pale. Her hair rose like wire. The snake opened its mouth, showed a forked tongue, and grabbed her shoulder, lifting her into the air. She screamed once more. The snake coiled around her, crushing her body. Bones snapped. Blood spurted from her mouth and nails. Her head pressed against the snake's cheek. Then the snake opened its jaws wide and swallowed her head. This hot breath blew across Rock's face. Its tail whipped the dust, nearly knocking him down. In that moment, Rock's hair turned gray, first one side, then the other. Sick with terror, he tore himself away, roaring wildly, and ran without seeing where. Chapter 9. Live porridge at Dugino Station. Agent Shchukin was a brave man. He spoke to his comrade Politis. "Well, let's go. Give me the motorcycle." Then he turned to a gray-haired man sitting on the bench. "Put down the flute." But the man, trembling, did not let go. He cried and moaned. His fingers were stuck to the flute. Shchukin, strong as a circus performer, bent them back one by one until he freed it. They placed the flute on the table. It was early morning, the day after Menya's death. "You'll come with us," Shchukin told Alexander Rock. "Show us where and what." But Rock pulled away in horror, covering his face. "Send me to Moscow," he begged, crying. Shchukin saw he was not himself. "Fine, the courier will take you." Later, Shchukin and Politis discussed the case. Politis thought Rock was insane, imagining things. Shchukin believed maybe a circus snake had escaped from Grichenka. Rock rose, stretched his arms like a prophet, and cried, "Listen to me. Why don't you believe me? Where is my wife?" Shchukin sent a telegram to Grichenka. Another agent was ordered to follow Rock and escort him to Moscow. Shchukin and Politis prepared for an expedition. They had one electric revolver, a French model from 1927, deadly within 100 paces. Shukin strapped it on. Politis took a belt-mounted machine gun. Together they rode a motorcycle 20 miles to the state farm. The palace appeared, white and silent. They passed a peasant cart, crossed the bridge, and entered the courtyard. Silence surrounded them. "Hey, who's there?" Shukin shouted. No answer. They searched the kitchen, empty with broken dishes on the floor. "Something happened here. A catastrophe," Politis said. The palace was also empty. They checked every room, then returned outside. "Let's search the greenhouse," Shukin ordered. They walked down the path. A strange hissing sound came from the glass building, like a steam engine. "Careful," Shukin whispered, drawing his revolver. Politis readied his gun. Inside, the greenhouse was alive. Huge snakes slithered everywhere, hissing, coiling, crawling through wires and roof holes. Broken eggshells crunched under them. A black snake hung from the electric globe. The air stank of rot. They saw piles of eggs, a dead bird, and a corpse by the door. "Back!" Shukin shouted. He fired 9 times, green bolts flashing. The snakes moved wildly, heads darting from every hole. Politis fired his machine gun. Suddenly, a monstrous lizard-like creature rushed from the barn. It bit Politis's leg, then his hand. He screamed. Shukin fired, killing a giant snake, then shot the beast without hitting his comrade. The crocodile-like creature fell dead, releasing Politis. But Politis was bleeding badly, dragging himself with one arm. "Shukin, run!" he moaned. Shukin fired at the greenhouse, breaking glass. But then a huge olive-green snake sprang from the basement. It wrapped around his legs, threw him down, and tore his scalp. Shukin screamed once, then was silenced. The state farm filled with hissing. From far away, a howl rose from Konsovka, but no one could tell if it was dogs or humans. Chapter 10. Catastrophe. At night, the editorial office of Izvestia was brightly lit. The fat editor was arranging telegrams for the second page. He noticed one proof and laughed. He showed it to the proofreaders and typesetters. On the paper was written, "Grichenka, Smolensk Province. A horse-sized chicken has appeared. Kicks like a horse. Instead of a tail, it has fancy lady feathers." Everyone laughed. "In my time," the editor said, "people drank until they saw elephants. Now they drink until they see ostriches." The telegram was dismissed as nonsense and removed. So the next day Izvestia came out as usual, without any mention of the strange chicken. Associate Professor Ivanov read the paper, yawned, and said, "Nothing interesting." He put on his white coat and went to work. In Persikov's office, things were busy. Pankrat stood nervously, waiting. "I'm listening," he said. Persikov gave him a sealed package. "Take this to Taka at the livestock department. Tell him he's a pig. Say it's from Professor Persikov. And give him the package." Pankrat left pale and frightened. Persikov raged, pacing the office. "This is madness. They keep sending chicken eggs, but I can't get what I need. 2 months waiting. America is not so far away. Chaos, disgrace." He counted on his fingers, calculating shipping times, furious. He grabbed the phone and called somewhere angrily. His office was prepared for dangerous experiments. Sealed doors, diving helmets, gas cylinders marked Dobrokim with skull and bones warnings. Took him 3 hours to calm down and return to work. He stayed at the institute until 11 at night, unaware of the rumors spreading in Moscow about snakes or the strange telegrams in the evening paper. Ivanov was at the theater, so no one told him. Persakov went home at midnight, read an English article in Zoological Herald, and went to bed. Moscow slept except for the gray building on Tverskaya Street, where the Izvestia presses thundered. Inside, chaos reigned. The editor shouted, furious, while typesetters wandered, reading bizarre telegrams that arrived every 15 minutes. Alfred Bronsky's pointed hat appeared, and the mechanical fat man creaked through the halls. Reporters rushed in and out, phones rang non-stop, and the building shook with noise. The typesetters gathered around the fat man. "We'll have to send planes with gas," he said. "There's no other way," they agreed. Someone shouted, "Persakov should be shot." Others replied, "What does Persakov have to do with it? It's that bastard at the state farm." The presses roared all night. By morning, motorcycles and cars crowded the courtyard. Newspapers spread across Moscow like white birds. By 11 o'clock, vendors had sold out, even though the circulation was 1.5 million. Meanwhile, Persakov arrived at the institute by bus. In the lobby stood 3 wooden crates, marked with German stickers and the Russian chalk words, "Caution eggs." Joy filled him. "Finally," he cried. "Pankrat, open them carefully and bring them to my office." Pankrat obeyed. Soon the office was covered in sawdust and paper scraps. Persakov shouted furiously, shaking the eggs in his hands. "Are they mocking me? This is madness. What is this, Pankrat?" "Eggs, sir," Pankrat answered sadly. "Chicken, you understand. Chicken. Damn them. Why do I need chickens? Send them to that scoundrel at the state farm," Persakov shouted, rushing to the phone. But before he could call, Ivanov's voice thundered in the corridor. "Vladimir Ipatjevich! Vladimir Ipatjevich!" He burst into the office, still wearing his gray hat, holding a newspaper sheet marked emergency supplement. "You know what happened?" Ivanov cried, waving the paper. Persakov shouted back, not listening, "They sent me chicken eggs. This Taka is an idiot. Look." Ivanov froze. He stared at the open boxes, then at the paper, his eyes wide with horror. "Now I understand," he whispered. He unfolded the sheet and pointed to a colored picture. It showed a huge olive-green snake with yellow spots, photographed from above by a plane. "Who do you think this is, Vladimir Ipatjevich?" Persakov pushed his glasses up, then down, looked closely, and exclaimed, "What the hell? It's an anaconda, a water boa." Ivanov sat down, pounding the table with his fist. "This anaconda is in Smolensk province. Rock-bred snakes instead of chickens. And they laid eggs like frogs." Persakov's face turned brown. "You're joking, Pyotr Stepanovich. Where from?" Ivanov pointed at the open box of eggs. "From there." "What?" Persakov howled. Ivanov raised his fists. "They sent snake and ostrich eggs to the state farm and gave you chicken eggs by mistake. Oh my God! Oh my God!" Persakov repeated, turning green, sinking onto his stool. Pankrat stood pale and speechless at the door. Ivanov grabbed the paper again and read aloud. Snakes are moving in swarms toward Mozhaysk, laying countless eggs. Eggs spotted in Dukovskoy district. Crocodiles and ostriches have appeared. Special forces stopped panic in Vyazma by burning a forest to block the snakes. Persakov rose, bluish pale, eyes wild. Anaconda, anaconda, a water boa. My God, he shouted. He tore off his tie, ripped his shirt buttons, turned red, staggered, his eyes dull and glassy. He rushed out, screaming. The institute echoed, Anaconda, anaconda. Catch the professor! Ivanov cried to Pankrat, who stood frozen in terror. Give him water. He's having a stroke. Chapter 11. Fight and Death. Moscow blazed with electric light. Every lamp was on, shades removed, and no one slept. 4 million people were awake. They shouted, ate, drank, and leaned from windows, staring at the sky filled with searchlights. White beams flashed and faded. On Tverskaya Yamskaya, chaos was worst. Trains full of panicked people arrived every 10 minutes. Crowds ran through the streets, packed buses and trams, crushed each other, and were shot at by soldiers trying to stop the madness. Windows shattered, engines howled. Posters declared martial law and warned of panic, but no one read them. Red Army units with gas were on their way to Smolensk. In apartments, people smashed dishes, packed and repacked bags, hoping to reach the stations. But all routes north and east were blocked by infantry. Trucks carried away gold reserves and crates marked Tretiakov Gallery. Cars roared through the city. Fires glowed in the distance. Cannons boomed in the night. Toward dawn, cavalry swept up Tverskaya Street. Thousands of hooves clattered. Crimson hoods fluttered. Pikes pierced the sky. The crowd cheered wildly. Long live the cavalry! Women shouted. Long live! Men answered. People threw coins, cigarettes, and watches to the riders. Women clung to stirrups, kissing them. Among the horsemen rode strange figures in cloaks, carrying gas cylinders. Tank trucks and armored vehicles followed, painted with skulls and the word Dobrokim. The crowd begged, "Save Moscow!" Songs rose, chants echoed, and hurrahs shook the night. At the head rode the legendary old commander, gray-haired, in a crimson hood. The crowd roared with hope. At the institute, things were quieter. Only faint echoes of gunfire reached the building. Looters were shot near Fulkanka. Streets nearby were empty. In his office, Persakov sat silently, head in his hands, smoke drifting around him. The red beam had gone out. Frogs in the terrariums were asleep. On the table lay a telegram. Smolensk was burning. Artillery shelled Mozhaysk forests to destroy crocodile eggs. Planes near Vyazma had spread gas, killing reptiles but also countless people who panicked and fled. A cavalry division had fought ostriches, destroying their eggs. The government warned, if the creatures could not be stopped within 200 miles of Moscow, the city would be evacuated. Food was stored for 6 months. Apartments were reserved for battles inside the capital if needed. Persakov read none of it. He stared blankly, smoking. Only Pankrat and Maria Stepanovna were with him. She had stayed 3 nights, crying, refusing to leave. She sat quietly on the sofa, watching the teapot boil. The institute was silent, and then, suddenly, everything changed. Suddenly, a hateful shriek came from the street. Marya Stepanovna jumped up, screaming. Street lights flickered. Pankrat's voice echoed in the lobby. Persakov raised his head, muttered, "They're going crazy, what can I do?" and sank back into silence. The institute's iron doors thundered. Walls shook. Glass shattered. A cobblestone flew through the window, breaking a table. Frogs shrieked in their terrariums. Marya Stepanovna rushed to Persakov, crying, "Run away! Vladimir Ipatjevich, run!" He stood, eyes flashing for a moment like his old inspired self. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "If Moscow has gone mad, where should I go? Stop shouting. What does this have to do with me? Pankrat!" But Pankrat could do nothing. The doors burst open. Crowds rushed in. Glass broke. Shouts filled the halls. Marya tried to drag Persakov away, but he resisted and walked into the corridor. A soldier appeared, firing his revolver at the crowd. He shouted, "Professor, save yourself. I can't hold them." The mob stormed in, screaming, "Kill him! He let the monsters loose." Persakov tried to block the door, shouting, "This is madness! Get out!" But Pankrat was already dead, trampled in the lobby. The mob surged forward. A short man struck Persakov's head with a stick. He fell, whispering, "Pankrat, Pankrat." Marya Stepanovna was murdered. The chamber was smashed, frogs trampled, tables shattered. An hour later, the institute burned. Corpses lay around it. Soldiers with electric revolvers surrounded it, and fire trucks poured water into the blazing windows. Chapter 12. Frost God on a Car. On the night of August 19th to 20th, 1928, an incredible frost came. It lasted 2 days, reaching -18 degrees Celsius. Moscow froze, doors and windows locked. By the third day, people realized the frost had saved the capital. The cavalry near Mozhaysk had lost most of its strength. Gas squadrons failed to stop the reptiles, but the frost killed them. After 2 days, when the cold ended, the monsters were gone. Fields and forests were littered with strange eggs, harmless now. Corpses of crocodiles and snakes rotted, leaving stench and disease. Epidemics spread, and the army worked for months with kerosene and hoses to clear the land. By spring 1929, it was finished. Moscow revived. Lights shone again. Cars moved. The moon hung over the Cathedral of Christ the Savior. On the site of the burned institute, a new zoological palace was built, led by Professor Ivanov. But Persakov was gone. His sharp finger and croaking voice were never heard again. The world spoke of the ray and the catastrophe of 1928, but soon his name faded, just like the red beam itself. The cameras were destroyed, and no one could recreate them. Only Persakov had the special gift to make it work.
Больше историй смотрите по ссылке. Читайте и слушайте одновременно интереснейшую классику, адаптированную под современный английский специально для вас. Погружайтесь в язык через увлекательные сюжеты англоязычной литературы. Такой формат помогает учить английский естественно, без зубрежки и тренировать навыки для реальных ситуаций.